To the January 19th meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I'd like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item project and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience. And please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and results of the voting can be learned from the planning department at 205-5895. If some issues arise in the deliberation session that are not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and plan unit developments. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please turn off all the cell phones at this time. Now we'll call roll. Jay Stubbs, Alan Cameron's here, Jennifer Denson, Carlos Gant, Shirley Sessions.
Here.
Taylor Atchison. Matt Anderson. Nick Amberger.
Here.
Scott Jones. Susan Carley. And Kirk Matei. Thank you. Okay, we'll move right into application number 1, which is a holdover of the north side of Government Street, 140 feet east of South Ann Street, known as Griffith Subdivision. It is a subdivision PUD and rezoning application. The rezoning is applied to move from B1 and B2 to all B2. The subdivision is, the staff recommends a subdivision for approval with 8 conditions. The PUD with the finding of facts of A, B, and C, and for approval with 7 conditions. The rezoning is recommended for approval with 2 conditions. Is the applicant present?
That sounds like it. I'm Jerry Bird, Bird Surveying, 2609 Halls Mill Road, Mobile. I've been representing the applicant. They are here today, Mr. and Ms. Griffith. And we've asked for 2 holdovers. First one, the neighbors wanted to meet. Second one, it was before Christmas. They wanted to meet with Christmas and New Year's. They wanted to wait for this meeting and give them time to go through a list of self-restrictions, which they did, I think, Monday night or Tuesday night. Finally got the restrictions on Monday, I believe. The neighbors have, as I'm told, 57 restrictions that usage that they want deleted. The Griffith are agreeable to 46 of those. Now, both sides are asking for one more holdover so they can kind of fine tune, hopefully, the allowed uses on the property. And that's what we'd be requesting today, is a holdover to next meeting, February 2nd, I think.
Jerry, can you give me you can email it to me later, a copy of the use restrictions that are proposed? We'll make sure we don't end up with a contract zoning where there's only one use allowed. So if you could give us time to review that before the next meeting, if it's held over.
We'll get up the list that's proposed right now, or what, and what they think they will agree to.
A few things I just want to make sure are clear. Right now, there has been no voluntary use restrictions form submitted. So that would need to be submitted and reviewed, as Mr. Anderson stated, also so that we could send that on to the commission so that you have that as well. So having said all of that, are you looking at a holdover until February 2nd or February 15th, allowing at least a week lead time?
You need them a week ahead.
Correct.
Okay, hold on. 2 meetings. February 2nd, 15th.
Okay, and just to FYI, February 15th meeting is on a Wednesday due to the parade schedule.
Okay. That's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Since we probably won't be discussing this since we're holding it over, I just wanted to know, generally speaking, what's the rub in terms of what is the neighborhood wanting excluded in particular that you're not already voluntarily restricting?
One of the uses they want to cut out is car wash, service station, restaurant. I haven't seen the list. I was told that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd.
Hello, I'm Stephen Griffith. Of the list of 57 suggested restrictions, these are the ones we could not agree to at this time. Food sales, square footage greater than 60,000 square feet, mobile food vendor park, a restaurant with a drive-through, and a restaurant with a drive-in. Not sure, I guess that's just a restaurant. I'm not sure. Snack or beverage bars, let's just say a Smoothie King or whatever that might be. Most importantly, though, is auto service, car wash, gasoline sales with auto service, kind of what we do. And then, lastly, there was the term convenience store and convenience store with gasoline sales. Those are the 11 items that we can't agree on at this time. The other 46 we've agreed to, and I will send you that information, Doug, on what, there'll never be a tattoo parlor / liquor store on that property. But this is what we've come up with so far, and we are trying to work with our neighbors. We'd like one more holdover, if possible. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here that wants to speak for this application? Anyone to speak against?
Just so I get a little clarity, this HUD is for the entire site. I know that it's also a subdivision. We've got 2 lots. Those voluntary use restrictions, were those on both lots in the subdivision?
We would have to plot the legal, but I'm going to say no. See the rezoning that's up there? That is the boundary of the rezoning application. So the restrictions would only apply to that geography.
Anyone else? Anyone to speak against?
My name is Bill Boswell. I'm here representing the Government Street Collaborative, a group of neighborhoods in the Midtown and downtown area. I'm going to preface my remarks in saying that what I'm going to speak on is the application before you. We are working with the applicants, and we sincerely want to come to an agreement that works both for them and for the neighborhood. But in the meantime, just in case, if there's any change of heart of how this application is going, I wanted to make sure that you're aware of our position at this point. So on behalf of the citizens of the Government Street Collaborative, we are against this application. It unnecessarily upzones a buffer B1 area that is appropriately separates a more intense B2 commerce from the adjoining and nearby single-family residences. Approval of such a precedent would set such a precedent for a similar rezoning within the area, which is within the historic districts and on Government Street. Approval would result in an almost full block adjacent to a stable residential historic district becoming more commercialized and open to all of the B2 by right or conditional development uses possible, some of which are entirely inappropriate to border residences. The site plan creates another large and unappealing hard surface parking area fronting Government Street. The current plan does not show adequate noise and visual screening. It does not reflect modern and urban development standards. The applicants have not identified, and this is our main concern, have not identified the planned use of the property, leaving neighbors unprotected from the nuisance-producing possibilities that can develop on their and next to their property. The neighbors' investment in their property would be threatened. This plan would continue a long-term trend of destruction and deterioration of our historic districts, where the teardown of many Government Street historic homes in previous decades were replaced by strip malls that have not succeeded and have been abandoned, car washes that have not succeeded and have been abandoned, drive-through restaurants that have failed and littered our streets and our residential properties, drugstores that have been abandoned and now attract homeless camps and illegal drug use. This plan, in its current form, does not do justice to the neighbors, does not support historic quality of life issues, and does not contribute to the continuing stability of Government Street. The neighbors have met with the applicants on numerous occasions to listen to their proposal, but at no time, as we've mentioned, have the applicants been able to give any specific plans on what they intend to put on the property. This makes it impossible for the neighborhoods to be aware of what type of business use will be in front of them in the future, creating instability in a stable historic neighborhood. It has become clear that the applicants intend on using a portion of the property for a budget rental truck facility that would require a variance to a B3 use. The neighborhood is opposed to this variance as the applicant has been cited on numerous violations of illegally conducting this truck rental business on this property. The neighbors' concerns are highlighted by the fact that there would be no realistic and practical control on the number of trucks parked on the property at any one time, and impossible to monitor restrictions placed on time that the trucks would be there. Therefore, we are asking for a holdover to allow a more complete planning process which addresses area residential concerns. We stand ready to continue our discussions with the applicants. We sincerely want to achieve a situation where they can pursue their economic opportunity, but not at the cost of the neighbors close by. Failing a holdover today, we request you deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here to speak against? Okay, we're going to move on to item number 2, which is, oh, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Cadell. I'm a property owner and have been since 1981 at 1321 Dolphin. So we're about 3 blocks away from the service station in question. I want to echo what Mr. Boswell has said. What we've got here is almost like a family fight, and we don't like a family fight. The Griffiths have been part of our neighborhood for a long time. However, we do have very serious concerns about what could happen, and we've seen it happen before. Now, my question is, if we can work out some voluntary use restrictions, number one, who would enforce those? And number 2, how long would they last?
Enforcement would be done by the city, and they would last as long as the zoning ordinance for the property is in effect, and it would cease to be in effect if there was a new zoning amendment.
So when the UDC comes in, because the UDC has not been adopted,
Every zoning that is in effect now that has an ordinance number and conditions associated with it moves forward with the UDC.
and does it continue if the property is sold?
It's attached to the property, not to an owner.
Okay, just like a variance is attached
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
property. So essentially what is being proposed would go on until somebody makes an amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Or to the zoning associated with the property.
And it's only this little piece, it's half of the property that you're requesting for the rezoning. And I just wanted to echo how concerning it is to think that this property could start creeping toward the residences. And we've seen it. I've lived in Mobile a long time, and I've seen this happen. So we really do want to work this out with the Griffiths, but if we can't hold it over, then I'm going to ask, in accordance with my written comments, that you deny all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Once more, is there anyone else here to speak against?
I wanted to clear something up.
So this is in response to the people that
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The budget truck issue is a whole different issue at this time. It is not even anything on that piece of property. We have a use variance application in, if that's the correct term, and we're going to work on And that will all be explained to those folks unless it needs to be explained to you all. But that has nothing to do with this. And the creeping to the neighborhood, we've been there forever, and there is another business closer to the neighborhood than we are. And then there is an empty lot on the corner next to it on Georgia Avenue. So we're not creeping any further. We're just trying to consolidate our zoning. And as far as future development, we don't know what's going to be there, but we are prepared to tell you in agreement with them what's not going to be there. And that's really all we can do at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to number 2. Number 2 is Swint Industrial Mobile, Alabama, LLC.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
the staff received a request for withdrawal on this application, or on all of item number 2. We received it this week, so we were not able to send out required notice, but the applicant is here to present or to concur with the withdrawal.
Is the applicant present? Is that the case? Withdrawn? Okay. Application has been withdrawn. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just a note, I just want to thank the developer. They came to a neighborhood meeting this past week, listened to the residents and the neighbors of that, and we're very transparent and open through this entire process. And let me just state for the record, I'm in full support of what you want to do and what you need to do. We just need to find the right location for that. So thank you all for the professionalism that you showed, both to the neighbors and to me as we went through this process, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to number 3, subdivision application. Lakeside Commercial Park, First Edition. Application is to make one legal lot from one meets and bounds. Staff recommends tentative approval based on 7 conditions. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicants in agreement? Anyone here to speak for? Anyone here to speak against? Very good. We'll move on to number 4, which is Bagby rezoning. It's a subdivision application and a rezoning application. Rezoning from R1 and B2 to B2. The subdivision application is to create one lot from 2 lots. Subdivision is recommended for tentative approval with 9 conditions, and the rezoning is recommended for approval with 3 conditions. Is the applicant present? Any questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, what's the impact if that waiver is not approved?
It's an existing condition, as pointed out by Mr. Lacoste. What the radius does is provides a smoother turning movement if there's a redo of the intersection. So instead of making that, complete right angle curve, it's a curve. But you have, Mr. Lacoste is correct, the other 3 blocks do not have that radius until dedication's required or accomplished.
I think it's a standard note that's on any of the streets like this. And looking at the aerial photo, it looks like there's been past or fairly recent ADA improvements there. You can kind of see the new concrete, so it's probably in its current condition. And it's not there's not an effort to improve those radiuses. So I think it's more of just a standard note that Downtown Alliance has brought that up when it's internal to downtown. And I've always told them, I said, I think it's good that we leave that standard note in there because it forces us to go back and look at it, because there might be a situation where we actually need the radius to capture where a sidewalk is, or if there's a tree there. 9 times out of 10, we don't need it, but leaving that standard note in there, it forces the collective body to look at it and make that call on more of a case-by-case basis.
And in that situation, the commission would simply waive VD6 of the subregs where that requirement's found.
And another difference to you, Scott, would be that if we remove that requirement, and in the future the city wants to do road improvements, we'd have to condemn that corner.
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Nick was saying. This is similar to downtown. This is part of the existing street grid, so creating a large parking turn right there would be a little bit unusual. So I would support omitting that.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Is anyone else here to speak for item number 4? Anyone here to speak again? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you speak up a little bit or get closer?
Yes.
Thank
Is that
you.
better? Okay, sorry. Again, my name is Catherine Gee. I purchased the home 1108, which is right across the street from the elevator company. For me personally, my concern is, and I was hoping maybe some of my neighbors would come, what is the reason for the rezoning, in the sense of what's going to happen to the property? What are they putting there? What is the reason for the rezoning, and why does it need to happen when it is obviously a residential area? And the elevator company, yes, it is there, but it's really not part of the aesthetics of the neighborhood. So what is the reason for the rezoning, and what are they going to be building there?
Again, Vince Lacoste. So Bagby Elevator has been working on putting a small storage, or basically a small, I think it's, don't quote me on this, maybe 20 by 20, small building on that piece of property there, shed. And where it's shown right there is not where it's now proposed, because we've got some setback issues to move it. So through a long process of trying to do that, it's that one piece that shed is on is a lot, one lot. And so in order to get an accessory structure on a building with no other building, we ran into issues with the city. So the city planning department suggested that we do a one-lot subdivision in order to combine it all together. And while we're here doing the one-lot subdivision, suggested that we clean the zoning up. We're not changing the zoning of what's currently there for the majority of the property. It's just there's a small part of the property, see that part that's in white? That's currently not zoned the same as the rest of that property.
Does that mean that it stays the R1, B2, or is it going strictly to a B2?
It's okay. That one piece that's in white would go to B2 to match the rest of the site.
So it was my understanding, though, that right now it's coded R1 residential with a B2.
Yes, so the brown is B2, the white is R1 currently, yes.
Right.
And so the suggestion from the city planning all of the operation under the zoning that's appropriate for what's actually occurring on the site. So we're basically looking to take that little piece and have it match the rest of the zone.
Which would be R1, B2.
It's just B2, right? It's not R1, B2, it's just B2.
Correct. All this property that's outlined in the bold line is owned by Bagby Elevator. The lotting in there, the portion here where the gravel lot is and where the storage building is located, it's on a separate lot. You can't have an accessory structure when there's no primary structure. So we suggested you need to combine your lots. All of the lots are under one ownership. They're combining it into one lot. Well, in so doing, you can't create a split zoning situation. So it's cleaning up an existing condition.
We've been hired for this building only, and they've been trying to do it for a year, and they told me that's all they're trying to do. And I can't speak for them, but I don't believe they're trying to do anything other than this one building.
But what does protect, much like the other situations here, what protects us if we change it from an R1, B2 to a strictly B2 for future buildings? If they do decide that they do want to add on, it is their property, they have that right if they want to add on to the existing building.
If they do add on, they still have to comply with all the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The biggest would be the provision of off-street parking. A building of that size, depending on how it's utilized, that demands a lot of parking. Additionally, they do have to provide buffers and all of the other elements of compliance.
So within that, is it possible to reassess to see if the shed could potentially go on the property that is zoned right under or behind, if you think about Pallet and St. Francis, can the shed not go on that property?
The shed is going on the.
Would you speak into the microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the shed is going, it's proposed on the B2 property. It's already B2.
No, I'm saying, you see this, the lower property, the one that's on St. Francis and
Right,
Pallet?
right.
Can it not go on that property?
I mean, it could, but I mean, it can go on the B2 property that we're already there. So I think all you're questioning is changing that little strip of R1 to B2. The shed can go anywhere on the property currently. I mean, unless they tell us otherwise, but we believe it could go anywhere. But their desire is for it to go there because of how it operates with their roll-up doors and their business. So they need it to function the way they need it to function as it relates to their current facility.
I think, again, my concern is just the fact that the zoning is being changed. And I'm questioning why it needs to be changed. It's an established old neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that we're trying to revitalize. It's got a lot going on. I'm not seeing that rezoning it is something that, for me personally, again, I'm the only person here talking about this, but I would like to just maybe have a little bit more discussion in regards to what is the future plans for this. I'm not convinced that they don't possibly want to increase the size of the company. There's a commercial lot right across the street that's available that they could purchase for parking. So these are just kind of where my concerns are. I'm not an expert. I'm just saying, as a homeowner that has this very old shotgun house from the 1900s, I don't want to see the neighborhood turn into a manufacturing area. The company itself is a great company. They're very quiet. We rarely hear anything. There's no issues with that. I just want to look a little bit more into the zoning part of it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else here to speak for or against? Thank you. We're going to move on to number 5, which I have to recuse myself on. So, Jennifer, please take over.
Okay, number 5 is 2201 Halls Mill Road. There's a subdivision and a rezoning. The subdivision is recommended for approval with 7 conditions, and the zoning is recommended for denial. Is the applicant here?
If I may draw to the commission's attention, you do have some comments at your places on number 5.
Jerry Bird surveying, 2609 Halls Mill Road, for the applicant. The zoning ordinance lists 4 conditions that would allow consideration to rezone any piece of property. Normally, there would only be 1 condition that would apply to a piece of property, but in this case, there's 2 of those conditions that would support our proposal. One of them being changing conditions in the area, and the other being increase in need for sites for business and industry. On changing conditions, this area of Halls Mill Road has changed over the years. There's 2 adjoining properties on our west side that actually fronts Halls Mill that have fuel transport trucks that are in and out and parked on site. And actually our property at the north end and down near the south portion have it's been used with semi trucks and trailer parking and storage over the last 10 years at least. The farmer's market property, which is kind of at our southwest corner going out to Halls Mill Road, that property has changed from its original conception, which was to provide a small local farmer a place to sell his produce to the public. And now it is a produce distribution center. Large trucks bringing in the produce, and the company redistributes the produce to local grocery stores using smaller trucks. And they're in and out during the day. On the second condition, increase in need for sites. I've had 2 commercial realtors tell me that property zoned I-1 is scarce and maybe non-existent at certain times in certain places. Business owners and investors needing I-1 are usually looking for 10 acres to 60 acre sites. This property is a little over 30 acres. So it's an ideal situation. We're not going in spot zoning a 4-acre tract in the middle of something. The property is located ideally for access to Airbus and Austell, as well as the State Docks container port. The site is located on existing or planned thoroughfares which will accommodate the traffic to the site. Major street plan lists Pleasant Valley Road as a major collector and Halls Mill Road as a minor arterial. Pleasant Valley Road would connect this site to US Highway 90. Halls Mill Road connect to McVeigh Drive and then to Highway 90. The staff report refers to the future land use map. I think that map, and it states in there, the map is only meant to serve as the general guide. It's not recorded ordinance like the zoning ordinance or the subdivision regulations. So the land use map, future land use map, could be changed in 2 or 3 months if there's a different thought of development. Staff report mentions there's R1 and R2 along the south line, but then fails to mention that it is largely undeveloped and is shown to be wetlands on the city website. We have provided a 25-foot buffer along the south line of our property and also a 25-foot buffer along the east line, which adjoins Slava Creek. To the yellow portion of the lots on Kerrigan, and there's 2 houses that's shown on the city website, and I'm not sure they exist in today's world. I rode down there on the way down here. But there's 23 houses shown on Kerrigan Drive. Of those, 5 of those have Kerrigan Drive addresses, and the rest of them could be anywhere from Florida to California and Baldwin County and scattered sites in Mobile. So apparently they're rental properties. I will mention here there were three comments that came in, two from two ladies that didn't mention their address, but I found one of them on a piece of property. This is Kerrigan Drive. This is our subject site, and she is on a vacant piece of property here, fronting down on Oslava Creek, totally wooded. Only access would be up out of a subdivision called Gulf Terra to get to it. She mentions it's a family legacy left to her by her father. I don't know what she will ever do with it. The elevation of the property is like elevation 6, and the floodplain is elevation 11, so it would have to be built up 5 feet off the ground. Not a biggie. They do it on Dolphin Island, but it's not Dolphin Island property. The third comment that came in was from a gentleman, 2306, I think, on Government Street. Must be around the loop. And general comments are not willing to change. Staff recommended letting the property remain to be B3 and go to the Board of Adjustment for a special exception. That's really not a user-friendly option, since the site plan that we would submit to the Board of Adjustment would be site plan specific. If we wanted to move the drive aisles around, we would have to go back and resubmit. And any maybe not a real minor change, but if you move it 25 or 30 feet, I think it would be expected to go back. It wouldn't look like it. And that would just be another submittal and wait for that deadline before anything could ever happen on the property. So zoning to I-1 with this use, I think, is the most reasonable option here and would accommodate our business.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Are there any questions from the commission?
Yeah, on the site plan, it looks like storage facilities. Is that accurate?
It's container storage, and that's parking spaces shown, I'll say. There's places for tractor trailers to be put temporarily. The actual semi-truck cab could be parked, but container storage was what is the primary use at this point in time.
So with I-1, does that allow hazardous materials?
No. Hazardous material storage would require, under the UDC, a conditional use permit.
Okay.
The reason I think Margaret's referencing UDC is because the time this application gets to City Council, the UDC will be in effect. So, yeah, likely. So, usually we wouldn't mention that because it's not in effect yet, but by the end of this process, it will be.
Mr. Byrd, do you know what the operating hours of this site would be?
I mean, excuse me.
Do you know what the operating hours of the site would be?
Normal, yeah, probably 7 in the morning to 5 or 6 in the afternoon.
Okay. Mr. Byrd, so with the primary access, I mean, obviously this site's trying to get to the interstate. So is it Halls Mill to McVeigh Drive to Government? I mean, is that the primary route?
I think it would be, yeah.
And so do you have any idea how many a day? Because, I mean, these are effectively 18-wheelers that are, I didn't realize they're containers, but, 1 or 2 containers on a thing. I mean, how many of these a day do we have going up and down Halls Mill Road?
I don't know. That might depend on what ship came in. when one comes in with containers on it, pick it up. It gets unloaded, need to store it temporary, pick it up, take it back to the yard,
Is it
whatever.
tens or hundreds? I mean, can somebody speak to what that might be? Tom? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Yeah, just one. Why do we need to go from B3 to I1? What is not allowed in B3 that you're trying to get to in the I1 for the use?
The I-1, that's where freight depot would fit. That's the terminology in the new UDC, which will allow for larger warehousing if in the future someone came and wanted it. Also, it would allow for an aggregate surface such as exists on the ground right now, as opposed to concrete or asphalt. Now, if a warehouse went in, I'm sure around the warehouse, it would have to be paved with asphalt or concrete in those areas.
So is it true the site's already kind of being used for this purpose? The northern part of the site's already doing this, isn't it? Yeah, aren't they already storing containers there?
Well, no. Oh, well, if they are, I don't know. Gulf Coast Trucks actually owns the land.
Mm-hmm.
Their shop is on one side, and they don't have enough room on their yard, I suppose, and
Right.
what they put out there is their overflow.
Got it.
Go back to that, the zoning. Jerry, the houses, the properties in yellow, they back up to what's the farmer's market
Yes.
property? And that's not included in this.
That is not included.
And that's now being used as a distribution center?
Do it?
That's being used as a produce distribution?
Yeah, place back there called Big Charlie's. I see their trucks at 5:30 in the morning and then during the day.
In the lot above that fronts on Hall's Mill, that McGuire?
Well, the one, I think the first one over that 50-foot strip, there's Farmer's Market 50-foot strip. The next one up used to be way back, Brown's Velvet Ice Cream, and then there was a meat locker there, and now I think that one is a secondhand furniture store. And then there is McGuire Oil, I think, or one called DHL. I think that one's first. DHL, DFL, that's the trucking company. And then McGuire Oil adjoins there where the corner was.
Are there any other questions? Does the staff have any comments about the recommendation for potentially going to, oh, I'm sorry. Does the staff have any comments about Mr. Bird's, I think in the staff report you had recommended getting a variance from the Board of Adjustment, possibly as an alternative?
Well, let me clarify. The staff recommended that the B3 zoning remain under the UDC because that should be effective by the time this application works its way to council. Under the UDC, this use would be allowed with what is called a special exception. Special exception is an application to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. It is a site plan and use specific approval. It is not a variance. So I have to stress and emphasize, and I will probably be doing this a lot in the coming months, that the standards for special exception are not the same as the standards for evaluating a variance. The standards for evaluating a special exception are laid out in the UDC, the criteria that the Board of Adjustment, not the Planning Commission and City Council, but the criteria that the Board of Adjustment has to utilize in evaluating the application. But again, I'm emphasizing it is not a variance, it is not hardship-based. So, going back to, the staff's recommended that the zoning stay as is, remain, and that the applicant pursue the special exception.
Margaret, with that statement, if ownership changed hands and they wanted to change the use of that property, then they would have to go back to the Board of Zoning Adjustments for
Here,
that change.
let me try and simplify. Any approvals granted by ultimately the City Council or the Board of Adjustment are attached to the real estate and not to the owning entity. So all of that would move forward. Now, when you're dealing with a site plan and or use specific approval, any change to that would have to go back through the corresponding process. But it could change from Ms. Carly, the property owner, with all the same conditions, to Mr. Jones, the property owner.
Margaret, so it's very equivalent to if the applicant provided use restrictions on it. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. It's similar to that. Yeah, the special exception. Yeah, it's almost like, you're keeping it at a lesser overall zoning, but there is a use allowance as opposed to keeping it at a higher zoning and having use restrictions. So it's accomplishing the same thing, but it's keeping it at the lower overall zoning.
I find your analogy a little painful, but I guess if I had to, I can agree with it.
Okay. I think I understand where y'all are coming from.
All right, if there's not any more questions, thank you, Mr. Byrd. Is there anybody else who is here to speak for the application? Anyone here to speak against? All right, thank you. We'll be moving back to Mr. Cameron will take back over.
Thank you, Jennifer. That will conclude the public hearing session of today's meeting. We will now move on to the deliberation session. Let's see. Item number 1, Griffith Shell. They requested a holdover.
So moved. 15th or the 2nd?
15th.
15th. So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, is there a motion and a second?
Roger.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item number 2
Been withdrawn.
was withdrawn. Item number 3 is Lakeside subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval with 7 conditions. The applicant is in agreement. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item number 3, Bagby, rezoning and subdivision. Subdivision is recommended for tentative approval with 9 conditions. Rezoning is recommended for approval with 3 conditions. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Of removing item comment number 2.
Second.
Bless you. And you're waiving VD6, which is where that 20. Thank you.
Subject to staff recommendations, striking
Mr. Amberger made the motion, and Mr.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 5, I'm going
We got
to,
to do the zoning.
pardon me?
We have to do the zoning, part B of
Oh,
that.
the zoning, I'm sorry, yes. Zoning is recommended for approval with 3 conditions. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item number 5, I'm going to step away, I'm refused.
Item number 5, 2201 Halls Mill Road. Is there a motion?
I had one comment on that. I rode down Halls Mill Road in this area today and the neighborhood surrounding it, and it seems so industrial in nature already. So I think Mr. Byrd brought up some good points of reasons why it could be changed. And I don't know, I guess I wanted to hear a little more discussion on why it couldn't be changed to industrial.
Yeah, I agree. We could take the subdivision first and get that one out of the way, though. So I would move to approve the subdivision subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Motion, properly motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. I'm looking at the zoning question now. Is there,
So, Madam Chair, I would say I did the same thing. I rode down there, and if you kind of look at the evolution of the businesses over there, I mean, it has become more industrial. I mean, you have that farmer's market is really a distribution center for all intents and purposes, and you have oil distribution and everything else. So, I mean, to me, it kind of makes sense that this would be the natural outcome. And with the land south of it being vacant, I don't really feel a compelling reason to avoid what seems like a natural progression anyway.
I have a question about the difference between the special exception and the industrial I-1 zoning. With the special exception, it would be limited to just this use, correct?
With the special exception, yes, it would be limited to a B3 use, and then it would have this specific approval for this use in a B3 district subject to this plan.
Because an I-1 zoning would have many more types of uses that would be different from what's in this neighborhood now. Is that correct?
It would allow a lot more industrial uses by right.
Is that primarily why the staff was recommending a different approach? Or is that not an appropriate question?
It's a large piece of property. It's 30 acres. It's not exactly, a small piece of property that's going to a different zoning classification. It is a large piece of real estate. But from the staff's perspective, the use can be accommodated with that approval in this existing zoning classification. But as this is the purpose of a public hearing. You have the staff's report in front of you, you have maps, you have site plans, and you have this information to evaluate, review, to go by, drive by, see the area for yourself. And then you have the additional input that you receive here. All of those go into your pot of decision making on the recommendation for this property.
Yeah, a big challenge that I see with it is unfortunately the roads to it. I mean, a carte blanche access for I-1 uses, it's a little 2-lane road that is a mix of businesses. I think actually Mr. Bird's business is actually there. And it's just that road is not, I want to see something there. I would like to see a lot there, but that road is kind of inadequate. And some of the neighborhood streets that tie to it, I know they've approached the council members about sidewalks and things that just aren't practical. So knowing a lot of truck traffic on there, I'd rather see it controlled, and let something go forward, but in a more of a controlled manner. and not just anything that could potentially show up in an I-1 use. That's my challenges that I see with the site.
I'm going to echo that. The one that we just had pulled on for today with the Hillcrest was the same exact scenario with Nevius Road, and they even had Hillcrest, which is 4-lane road, coming in there. I think when this is developed, we can say 10 trucks going in there. For the 80-acre site, we were talking 600 to 700 trucks a day coming in there. And if this is 30 acres and every bit of this is container transition yard, whatever it's going to be, I think 10s are on the low side of that. So I think there needs to be some studies done with regards to, you know, what is this going to do with trafficability on Halls Mill Road before we say let's just rezone this to an industrial piece of property, because I think that is a valid point with regards to what can it handle on that.
So is there a motion on the floor for this zoning application?
I'll make a motion to deny the zoning in accordance with staff recommendations.
Motion's properly made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
3 to 5, the motion passes.
Okay, with that, that concludes we have one more item on the agenda, approval of the sub-regulation.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. If I may, you have on your agenda, today's the public hearing to consider proposed comprehensive amendments to the subdivision regulations. And if I may, I'll just kind of give a bit of an overview. As part of the process of drafting and adopting the Unified Development Code, it was communicated throughout that process that amendments to the subdivision regulations would be required. Once the UDC was adopted in July of 2022, staff began the process of reviewing the existing subdivision regulations and drafting proposed edits. As communicated during the outreach process, allowance for minor subdivisions in compliance with state code are proposed in front of you now. What this means is a proposed subdivision of 6 lots or fewer that fully complies with the regulations and requires no dedication of right-of-way would be allowed to be approved administratively. However, please note 2 things. 1, notice will still be provided to all adjacent and directly across the street property owners in compliance with state law. And 2, any aggrieved party can appeal the administrative decision, and in so doing, a public hearing will be held with the Planning Commission. Essentially, at this point, the application would follow the existing process we have now. Many of you served on the commission when we exercised our planning jurisdiction, which extended 5 miles beyond the corporate limits. Enforcing the subdivision regulations in unzoned areas by necessity incorporated some language to try and somewhat regulate development in this unzoned area, stipulating standard setbacks and a 10-foot buffer. However, as we no longer regulate outside the city limits, the subdivision regulations can now completely rely upon the underlying zoning of the property. The remainder of the edits in the document before you now are to provide for compliance with the underlying zoning. For example, the Commission frequently has to waive Section BD9 of the subdivision regulations, which require a 25-foot front yard setback. We frequently have to recommend a waiver of that requirement in historic districts. However, the document before you now simply requires compliance with the underlying zoning. I do want to draw to the attention of the commission, we did receive some comments, and you all have a copy of those at your places. This is a public hearing. You will need to ask if there's anyone here to make comments, and of course, staff is available for CRESH to answer any questions.
Is anyone here to comment on the proposed sub-regulations?
The fee schedule was adopted by the City Council last week.
I don't think we revised the bid. Yeah. I think if there's curb and gutter, that would be basic curb, the 26 feet, which is what.
Okay, two things. One, not that it doesn't need to change, but that is what's in the existing regulations, and that was carried forward. And two, did you have a specific recommendation, or were you just pointing out that to you that was a little wide?
I don't think we disagree with you. It's wide, but I think it probably was intended to mean the curb and gutter. Right. The alley is probably getting, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's probably tying back to a fire code situation, isn't it?
Yes, new alleys are only going to be allowed actually in the Spring Hill overlay and perhaps in the downtown development district. But it is related also to the fire code requirement. I think the fire code requires a minimum 20-foot clear width for the truck, and then if there's a hydrant, they require even wider. No, these would not be allowed public alleys. They'll be private only.
So I think that the days of 10 and 12-foot wide alleys are over.
And that may be fine.
Yeah,
I don't see them often at all anyways. It was just something that stood out. And I'd rather Vince talk to the design.
Yeah, Vince Lacoste, Bethel Engineering. As far as the pavement width, I hope that that's back to curb, but back to curb
Yeah.
is 2 feet, that would be a 22-foot asphalt, within 2 and 2, taking you to the 26. And I think that's good. I think that's in line with what we see in other places.
Yeah.
I just hope it's not 26 foot of asphalt and then 2 and 2. And the way it reads, it kind of reads that way. There's 26 foot of asphalt. One more thing, just in case y'all are still considering that. I mean, it's more asphalt. That means there's more runoff, more drainage. To keep that limited is helpful from a drainage standpoint too.
It's just thicker asphalt. One layers of asphalt is not enough. We've got some challenges around the city with that.
So yeah, that just wanted to, just like I said, clarification there, just kind of refining the wording there, I think would be helpful. Because obviously we have design standards that back in their review with their team. So the only other thing that I saw really is an opinion, and it's page 25 when we talk about lot sizes. I think I work across 3 states from Birmingham all the way down to Tampa for residential development, home building, do a lot of work in that sector. You are seeing tremendous rising in costs from land starting at the beginning to then developing roads and construction associated with that. Density is important. I think it's important to the city. We've had 50-foot lots, lot and block, across this country for years and years and years. We've improved how we drain properties. I really think there needs to be a relook at, if the city is an urban area, we got suburban in here, 50 versus 60. It's really subjective. Why not consider just going to a 50-foot footprint, period? We're doing that in other counties. I mean, Pensacola downtown is allowing you to do 30-foot lots. You have a lot of areas that I think, as cost of construction continue to rise and you want growth and development within the city, we've got to be thinking about, hitting those standards. Houses footprints are getting smaller. They're getting more custom. But we can handle the drainage. We can handle the fire code within that 50-foot footprint. I just believe that we might be missing the boat by continuing to have a 60-foot footprint in the city, when if you go to Midtown or downtown, we've got lot and block that has been since the early 1800s, and it's functioned properly. So why would we, with better advances in technology, drainage, engineering, measures, as we look to annex and add other pieces to the city and grow the city, I just think it really is something to consider. I really think a 50-foot blanket footprint is appropriate, for moving the city forward.
Let me take this opportunity to comment, especially while we got the ears of the engineer and a surveyor there. Many of the challenges that we have in the city, in the Midtown, those areas with drainage, are where they're, unfortunately, because Mobile being flat and having large drainage, we don't have adequate enough easements to go back in and repair the drainage that was put in. So unfortunately, I wouldn't have an argument with a 50-foot lot. I just need a 20-foot side setback, and there you kind of get back into the same scenario. We've got a lot of problems throughout the city where we can't go back in and reasonably have access to maintain those drainage systems. Really, it's kind of regardless of the lot size. It's just, as y'all develop those subdivisions, you got to think about it. In 30, 40, 50 years, there's going to be groups like us, having to go back in and do maintenance, whether it be dig those pipes up and work on joints, line them, fix inlets. And when everything's all on top of one another in an environment, a rain environment like we have, you just can't. Again, that's just a generalization of things, and I understand what you're saying about the lots and the density, and we want that. But when you design these drainage systems and these easements that support them, there's got to be the mindset that some governmental entity or private consulting firm is going to go back in and have to work on those drainage systems in the future. Unfortunately, we don't build them foolproof, and I wish we did, and me and George might be out of a job, but that is the reality, and that's the reality of Midtown. That's why a lot of why there's the flooding problems that exist down there.
Yeah, and I do understand that completely. I think the good thing about new development and things that there is a very hard look at drainage and easements, and now Dewberry probably does the majority of subdivision across the southeast, probably 80 to 90%. It's common that setbacks also contain utility and drainage easements. It's pretty much
Just
standard
remember,
nowadays.
Midtown was new at one point in time.
Right.
So
And I'm
think
just thinking about,
it
trying to think forward about future growth, possible, annexation, county property coming into play now. Just thinking through those things. I understand the challenges that you have on your plate currently, but I believe there are measures. I think there's great engineers out there, great people thinking ahead, because they don't want to get sued. They don't want to get into a situation. So they're taking a hard look at that, and just think that's important. And I think the only thing I'll say on that same page, and why I think it's pretty eye-opening, is that we say suburban at 60, we say urban at 50, but then underneath that we come in and we talk about commercial at 60. Now, commercial is going to have a larger footprint in terms of infrastructure, parking, drainage problems. It just doesn't seem to line up with me. If I'm building a residence that has a sidewalk, a driveway, a house, maybe a porch, versus someone who's trying to maximize their footprint, seems like, a residential 60-foot lot compared to a commercial is a lot less impact. So just want to kind of point that out. But otherwise, I just want to say, I know this has been a lot of work to get to this point. Commend everybody that's been working on this, from the admin, planning, all staffs. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm glad to see something new. Thanks.
Yeah. Is anyone else here that wants to make comments?
My name is Wanda Cochran, 465 Dauphin Street, downtown, longtime resident, cheerleader for urban development. I submitted some written comments, technical stuff. I don't want to talk to you about that. You can read that. I just wanted to say a couple of things and kind of piggyback on the Holly surveying fellow. So, my goodness, in the last, 4 or 5 years, we've had a new comprehensive plan, we've got a new UDC, and once this is adopted, that phase will be complete, and it took a long time. Looking forward, as I understand it, the next step is to start over again by looking at the comprehensive plan, because plans have to be updated every 5 years. Cities are very complex organisms, and it's not the type of mechanical complexity that you can figure out and solve. It's more like a biological thing. Everybody has a bunch of free will, and we're all running around. So that's why you have to continuously review where you want to go. And so what I'm saying to you now is not so much to necessarily change where you are, because you got to get past this phase so that we can further refine. But I guess what I want to say today is the Planning Commission is a separate entity from the City of Mobile. You are the keepers of the plan. You're the creators of the plan. You're the manufacturers of the vision. And if I look at the vision that you guys have adopted, and all the other plans really that have been adopted in the last 5 or 10 years, what is called out for downtown, midtown, what is now the urban area for the new UDC, is this desire for community, for walkability, to be able to walk to a store, to be able to have your kid walk to school perhaps, to get on your bicycle. You get it. Walkable urbanism. There's also a desire expressed in the plan and also the zoning ordinance, a recognition that the city is going to have to get a little thicker, going to have a little more density, And so to achieve that is going to require not some grand vision, but it's going to have to happen one incremental step at a time. So when you look at our comprehensive plan, I want you to take it out at some point and look at it, but don't look at the text. Just look at the pictures. The Avenue of the Oaks and with the azaleas in full bloom, the shots of Dauphin Street, the historic properties, the sidewalks, the children, the water sprinklers, the dog, you name it. That is what our personality is. It's a city that is humane, that has choices, and increasingly over time will return to what it once was, which was a real city where people could walk. Now, I live downtown, and I consider myself extremely fortunate. I go days without getting in a car. Days. And I could go even further if it were safer. So in looking forward, I would really like for you guys to spend some time thinking about density. And this is, and Nick, I know, and I don't mean to address you separately, but because you're an engineer, I think you know this. Density doesn't come from the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance addresses it. Density is a function of street design. And if you don't understand that, I invite you to take a walk down Dauphin Street and experience that density, and then walk down by the mall. If you have a street that is designed at a human scale, the development will arise. New York City doesn't have very many single-family homes on a 75 square, because the value of land also drives density. So your actions today on the subdivision regulations are what I would term quasi-legislative in nature. You have been delegated by the state of Alabama the power to write subdivision regulations. But what kind of power is it? Well, it's constrained, number one, by the rule of law. So your rules have to follow whatever the law says. So on the 60-foot lot business, even if it's a great idea to reduce lot sizes, when the UDC comes into effect, those lot sizes are going to be fixed by law, so you will be constrained. You won't have any discretion over that. The other thing that's supposed to guide you is subdivisions and the zoning ordinance are two pieces of the puzzle that are supposed to implement the community's values that are expressed in the master plan. That's what it's all about. It's not ad hoc decision making. It's not what I like. I mean, heck, you know, if I were in charge, there wouldn't be any streets probably. But it's not about personal preference. It's about adhering to the vision. Now, we can all have lots of disagreements about how we get there from here, but we all need to look at the vision that's been expressed in the planning documents. Oftentimes when I read staff reports, I read things like, well, the plan says this, but it's not the law. So I look forward to the hard work that y'all are going to have to put in to implement the vision. And I also thank you for everything you've done to get us to this point. It is not easy. It's an old city, and it deserves the best treatment y'all can give it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else here that would like to make a comment? Do we need a motion, Margaret?
You have the document before you now. You've held the public hearing. If you want to close the public hearing, go into deliberation. You can approve as submitted, approve with amendments, or hold it over.
Okay, if there are no more comments or questions, let's close the business portion, and we'll open the deliberation session.
Do we need to revise the roadway stuff, or can that be something done? Comments about the road width, or can it be done administratively?
You know,
or just a clarification for what it is? Because I don't think it's a change from what it was before.
exactly.
But I think it was probably
It
vague, and
is
it probably needed
exactly as written in the existing regulations. I would defer to legal counsel, which I am bracketed by.
maybe it needs a little drawing, or maybe it needs a drawing or something.
And here's the past 5 years. No, I'm teasing.
Does it maybe need like a little drawing, something to show what that is?
I think it's possible it can be done by policy. Yes. So on page 23, on number 10, that first sentence, roadway pavement widths, the minimum roadway pavement widths and for streets and alleys, back of curb to back of curb shall be, and then you run down the list, which is Minor Street is 26 feet. But again, that'd be back of the curb to back of the curb.
Yeah.
If you put that clarifying statement in there.
That address, you know.
You're not getting this back.
Read it, so I don't know, but does that cover all streets that might, in some areas,
Minor
not
streets.
include a curb, though? Are they, oh, so minor, so, and all minor requires curb, correct? I guess I'm
Hold
just
on.
asking if a scenario came up without curb, like the alleys require curb, you know, by. Yeah, I guess my question is like, do all of those require curb and gutter? Or are you going to say back a curb to back and curb, but an alley might not require a curb and gutter? I don't know.
The starting point is everything. The city is curb and gutter. That's the starting point.
Okay.
There's exceptions that you have to work
Yeah,
out with us.
I'm good with that.
Measured at back, applicable back to curb.
Yeah.
Any more discussion among commissioners?
The other thing staff would like to point out is we would like to request an effective date of the subdivision regulations of March 1. That gives a month for our applications to be updated, posted on the website, so that everything UDC and subregs go effective and those new applications are out there for use.
So I have a question before we do any motions. So what I just heard was that once these subdivision regulations are adopted, we don't have any discretion. So if we get to the point where, you know, at such a time we might have a situation where, due to the surrounding conditions of a neighborhood, it might be desirable to make a, you know, to subdivide a lot to be smaller than it is, but it doesn't fit within the realm of what's in the regulations. So there's no discretion whatsoever, because that's what we.
There's a couple of things on that. One, I will say, in terms of lot sizes, those areas are laid out in the zoning ordinance. So that's your square footage. So if the lot is going to be less than the area allowed in that zoning district, you could approve the subdivision conditionally upon them obtaining either a rezoning or a variance. But the widths are not dictated in the zoning ordinance. The areas and the setbacks are. And one of the things this document tries very hard to do is to make sure it states compliance with the underlying zoning. So that way too, if the zoning's changed, you're not having applicants come back to you asking for a setback line to be changed on a plat.
As long as we still have the opportunity to do the conditional approvals like we've done in the past for different situations, I think that's an adequate level of ability.
Right, but if it's something that is specifically listed in the zoning ordinance, yes, you're still going to have to send them down that path.
I would make a motion to approve the amendment to Chapter 64, Appendix A, Downtown Development District, and all the other.
You're referring to the wrong thing.
Wrong one. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Let me redo this motion. I would move to approve the proposed comprehensive amendments to the subdivision regulations as proposed, with the clarification on the pavement that staff elucidated earlier.
With an effective date of March 1st. Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, we have one last item on the agenda. Staff is requesting that the commission schedule a public hearing for Wednesday, February 15th to amend Chapter 64 of the Unified Development Code, Appendix A, Downtown Development District. The purpose of the amendment is to modify the regulating plan to rezone properties fronting Beauregard Street between St. Joseph and Lawrence Street from T4 and SD Special District to SDWH, and to amend, and this is a clarification or a correction, Appendix A, Section 10B7, paren B, regarding transparency.
February 15th.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes.
Is there any other business?
This is just a call for public hearing.
Strictly to set the public hearing date. Just to give you a little more information. Yes. This is the former Press Register site. It, like the Civic Center, is zoned special district and thus has no standards. There's also additional property being proposed to be incorporated into that site, which is zone T4. The applicant is looking to rezone all of that to special district warehouse, which is an existing transect within the Downtown Development Code. They're also proposing to amend the transparency requirements for this site. So this is setting the public hearing for those two amendments, the rezoning and the text amendment, for February 15th.
We need a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any other business? We're adjourned.